So, first thing first, Wednesday I was supposed to stream. Apologies for not streaming. My partner and my son was very unwell, so I was looking after them. Can't really look after them while I'm also streaming. They are asleep at the moment, so here I am making an awesome video. Well, a set of three actually, so hopefully you'll enjoy them. But today we're going to be talking about Sony and Kadokawa. It seems that this deal has been on the talk. They've been talking about this and kind of sharing, interest because Kadokawa seems to really want to sell. There seems to be something here that doesn't really make sense, and it's for me. They're starting to get some red flags here. This is almost starting to look like a Bungie 2.0. Hopefully, it's not, and From Software isn't in any danger of actually collapsing or having any form of negative impact on them, whether this still goes through or not. But it does seem like Kadokawa in general is very gung-ho in actually making sure that this deal goes through, and they are very, very persistent that they need the whole thing to be done in kind of like a full merger. Sony wants to kind of nitpick up parts and take what they want, and Kadokawa is saying, no, that is not what we want. We want everything, because you've got other companies out there like Kakao who actually want to come in as a hostile takeover and take them out, and own Kadokawa in its entirety. And this is something Kadokawa does not want. They are keen to keep at least the operations of Kadokawa in Japan and run by a Japanese company, albeit Sony is now pretty much predominantly run in the US, so it doesn't kind of make sense, but they do have a base in Japan, so that's probably why they're alluding to this. But before we get started with the actual content, let's have the drop. So, here we are. As you can see here, Kadokawa says all or nothing. Kadokawa doesn't want to sell From Software Studios to Sony and is pushing for a full merger. They're not willing to accept anything midway. They're not willing to sell parts of the company. Even though Sony is trying to nitpick what it can, it's clear, Sony is clearly seeing here that Kadokawa probably isn't in the best state. So they're trying to use their overwhelming, position in order to try and exert that in trying to kind of siphon the parts of Kadokawa that will make money to them. Obviously, Kadokawa is a massive distributor of anime, and having, that is also going to be something that Sony is clearly wanting. So it doesn't, to me, it's never been about From Software, even though this is what a lot of people are focusing on. And, it's saying here Kadokawa doesn't want to sell From Software Studios to Sony. For Sony, it's never been about From Software. It's always been about the anime. Now, you'll have the Koala Man who works in the elevator, X-Volt. That's why he blocked me, because I figured out where he works. He thinks I'm actually, copying or something. I literally couldn't care less if Sony bought From Software. Dude, go for it. I mean, whatever. I've got a PlayStation. It literally won't affect my life in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that the anime side of things is where it becomes a little more problematic, especially in the West where we actually live, because at that point Sony will have such a controlling majority, people won't really have any other choices. Now, I get Koala Man doesn't really understand the concept of monopolies. He's a bit too thick to understand that, but monopolies are a thing that are generally bad. So if you want to go and educate yourself over in the jungle with your fellow koalas, that might actually be a good thing. But anyway, as we were talking here, you can see here that Microsoft has joined the chat. By the way, the Bloomberg article mentions that Microsoft is also interested in buying Kadokawa, and obviously not because of the advertising agency, so the fight for the company is reaching a new. Now, in my opinion, this is a nothing burger, because Kadokawa wants this to stay in Japan and run in Japan by a local company. They do not want to sell it to Kakao, and by definition, they do not want this going to, to Microsoft. They want this to stay in Japan, and Microsoft doesn't really have a presence. They did have with Tango, and they do have some studio over in the East, but it's not really something that's really established. So with Tango out of the way as well, they've pretty much got no foothold over there outside of their kind of mini studio that God knows what they're doing over there. But you can see over here, Xbox, PlayStation compete for From Software, a major stakes battle for gamers. I don't think Xbox is in this race at all, by the way. And honestly, like I said at the start, before Koala Man tries to misquote me and catch me out of context, again, I know for some Xbox fans this will be a problem. For me personally, it doesn't affect me. You know that meme from Street Fighter?
For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
And honestly, I feel like I'm Bison. And I don't want to say X-Fault is Chun-Li because I'd be actually insulting Chun-Li. But in terms of the context of that conversation, I feel like this is really relevant here. But anyway, as we go, Kadokawa Corporation, the parent company of the renowned studio From Software, Elden Ring, Dark Souls. Dark Souls is if I'm not mistaken, a Sony IP, may become the focal point of strategic rivalry between Xbox and PlayStation. It won't. Recent reports suggest that Kadokawa is open to a full acquisition by Sony, should the latter decide to finalize the negotiations. Now, I guess it really depends on how desperate Kadokawa is to actually be purchased. They clearly do not want a hostile takeover from Kakao. That is something that's, adamantly clear. This is something they absolutely do not want. So, if Sony's acquisition falls through and they can't afford it for whatever reason, they may, in that situation, look at the lesser of two evils and say, right, we've got Tencent, which we probably don't want to go to because their relations might not be great. The only option then would be Microsoft, because Tencent is in this race too. Sony and Kadokawa have been discussing a potential acquisition for several years, but no agreement has yet been reached regarding the level of commitment required. According to Bloomberg, the talks have recently entered a critical phase, described as very encouraging. Both companies are now in formal negotiations, making the deal is increasingly likely. Meanwhile, Xbox is reportedly keeping a close eye on the situation. Following its recent spree of acquisitions, Microsoft Gaming Division might consider stepping in to prevent Sony from securing From Software. This mirrors a broader trend where Xbox's studio acquisitions have pushed PlayStation to respond, creating a competitive dynamic that could ultimately benefit gamers. As Kadokawa carefully weighs its approach to managing its gaming and anime assets, the future of From Software remains uncertain, but the stakes for the gaming industry have never been higher. I don't think the stakes for the gaming industry is high at all. And, as I said in my previous video, if this transaction goes through and Sony does merge entirely with Kadokawa, I fully expect those games to be exclusive. This isn't coping. I mean, I don't care for the games personally, but I know a lot of people do, and it might be a problem for them. But for me, sorry, Koala Man, you're really coming after the wrong person here. But I do expect them to be exclusive. Obviously, Elden Ring sold 20 million copies. That's no small feat, especially for the genre that it actually is. It was a breakout hit and has attracted a lot of attention. It'll be interesting to see what the next Elden Ring actually does, because people like me who purchased it will not be purchasing it again because I didn't enjoy it. So it'll be interesting to see how many people it does actually appeal to. But that aside, there's no problem in my eyes with Sony making them exclusive. That's what you do when you acquire a business. My problem has always been the anime side. That will, that portion of it will give Sony unparalleled, control in the West, which pretty much is a monopoly. A number of, I think it's like 2 articles now I've read. I wouldn't say a number because that insinuates that I've read like 5 or 6, but I think I've read about 2 articles now, and both of them pretty much state that Sony would have like a 90% controlling majority in the West of anime in general, and that is huge. I mean, at that point, it is a monopoly. So that has always been my concern, not the gaming side. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops, and if Sony is going to go all in and pick it up. But, you know, time is going to tell. And if they don't, what are they going to do? Because it does look like, I mean, based on everything I'm seeing, it does seem that they are not in the best financial place despite the success of Elden Ring. Because they are adamantly trying to sell this. That or Kakao has a clear window into actually purchasing enough shares to do a hostile takeover where they will have no choice but to sell to Kakao. So they are trying everything in their power right now to get this transaction to go through. They want it as much as Sony does, so it's all about the two of them coming to an agreement. And because From Software, well, Kadokawa is now desperate to make this deal go through, Sony has the leverage to be able to dictate some unfavorable terms. And you know what? Business is business, and that's just how it goes. But if it falls through, it'll be interesting to see if they're willing to go to the lesser of two evils, and if they're willing to change their stance and actually look away from Japan and actually look to the West to see if there's, you know, if they can come to a deal with Microsoft, where Microsoft will potentially buy them and leave them divested to do their own thing and have their games on Game Pass, but they, you know, they have the freedom to run in the way they want within, as long as they're making a profit. They are going to now be, you know, still owned by Microsoft, but, you know, they'll still have their independence. Maybe like a situation with the whole Bungie and Sony situation. Microsoft would still need to oversee and make sure things are going well, but they will have some autonomy. I don't know. It's interesting to see how this actually develops, because I think overall that this is going to be interesting. But one thing no one should actually be complaining about, and I'm seeing a lot of people, especially after Bethesda, well, ZeniMax and Activision Blizzard King, you know, it's a bit hypocritical for anyone to say that Sony shouldn't buy this and it'll be the end of the world, regardless of how it looks. You know, business is business, fair is fair. And, you know, again, I will reiterate, as far as the gaming side is concerned, whatever. My issue is and has always been the anime side, because monopolies are just bad. Watch this get taken out of context again by Koala Man. I guarantee it's going to happen, because that dude can't do anything but take things out of context and try to take the win. It is what it is. But if you've enjoyed the video up until this point, do leave a like, subscribe, hit that bell to stay up to date with all content I release, and I will see you in the next one. As always, remain legend.